Hi guys, so last time I made a video talking about my experience with Christianity, I focused on a lot of things that were really hard and really difficult, and I think those things are important to talk about, but today I wanted to focus on some positives, some positive experiences I've had when leaving Christianity. Um, Obviously when you're leaving an entire religion, an entire belief system, there's a lot of complex emotions that come with that. There's a lot of pros, there's a lot of cons, there's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs, and I just wanted to focus on some of the positives, so I decided to pick 5 positives that meant a lot to me. They're in no particular order, and I'm not claiming these are like my absolute top 5, but when thinking about it, when writing all of this down, I thought of things that I really, really loved about leaving that belief system. So I'm going to share them with you guys, so let's get into it. Okay, so number 1 is it positively changed the way I'm able to interact with other people. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this. And when I bring this up, a lot of Christians seem to get angry with me and they say, that's a you problem, that's not a Christian problem, or that's not a religious problem. I highly disagree. And if you grew up in evangelicalism, I'm sure a lot of you guys will know what I'm talking about when the culture of the religion and its teachings or whatever will tell you how to view and interact with people basically. From my experience, I saw this in a lot of different ways. But in general, for example, a lot of people growing up in a Christian environment are told that the only right way to believe, the only right way to live, and that is the way Christians live and Christians believe. Anything else is wrong. That definitely changes how you interact with others because there's always this us versus them mentality. And there's always the in group and the out group. And I remember this in so many different ways. I remember different things being said about Muslims. I remember different things being said about atheists. I remember things being said about Satanists. I remember things being said about all different sorts of groups of people. And they were all kind of described in the same way, and that way is being lost. Their soul being lost. They're deceived by Satan or whatever, or the world. Or they're rebellious and they're doing it on purpose. And they just hate God, and that's why they want to deny him, and that's why they don't believe like us. Just so many different stereotypes of so many different kinds of people. It was never like, oh, somebody can but be different than you, believe differently than you, and that is okay. And that's an okay thing that can be positive. It was never the different people were never associated with anything positive. It couldn't be just they were different. It had to be they're different because they don't believe the truth, or they want to turn away from the truth, or they're lost, or whatever, like I said. And again, that's obviously going to impact how you view the world around you and how you interact with people. Um, because I feel like when you're taught all of these things, indoctrinated into all of these things, when you go out into the real world and and this happened to me in my early 20s when I actually like went out past my hometown and was interacting with people who weren't just like white, straight, and Christian. It was a struggle to just be in the moment, meet people, and hear who they were, and not have this like weird thing in the back of my head of like, do they believe the truth? Do they believe like me? Because a lot of Christians are taught like people need to believe like you. Like this is the only right way to live. So I feel like it's hard to, even if you want to, meet people authentically and just hear what they have to say and just get to know them and their differences and their different thought processes, their different beliefs, their different culture, whatever it is. It's a lot harder to do that because it creates all of these barriers. Um, because of the us versus them mentality. A lot of times Christianity wants to cut you off from the other parts of the world by saying we are not of the world. That the earthly things are bad, and we're focused on God and heaven and like bigger spiritual things. Um, so it definitely creates this divide, and it's frustrating to me when Christians pretend like that's not the case because it most definitely is. I know I didn't imagine this, and I know a lot of other people don't imagine this. Um, and the more I spent time talking to different people, the older I got, the more I was like, all of these weird stereotypes I was told growing up, or all of these things I was told about. I was also told certain things like people who've had abortions or gay people, they're miserable, they're not happy people, they're not okay, like just strange things. I feel like that was mostly about like gay people, and I still have people who I know who are Christians who tell me that gay people can't possibly be happy, which is crazy to say that there's only one way to be happy. There's only one way to have true peace. That was another thing that was kind of said, is like you can't have true peace unless you're believing in the Christian God, which is fake and false. And I know that now, obviously. But if that's all you've been taught your whole life and you go out in the real world, those are internal biases you're going to have just starting off, and it's really hard to deconstruct that when that's all you know. But I do think it's our job to do that and to have our own experiences and really be able to, get past what we're taught and have our own experiences with real people in real scenarios instead of just believing whatever we're being told or indoctrinated to believe. Um, this came pretty quickly to me after being exposed to people who are different than me, because I would start to build these relationships with different people, and that involved different religions, different races, different sexualities, different genders. Um, and very quickly, I was like, this doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem right in a lot of different ways. Um, and one thing that hit me too is a lot of people I came across had been very hurt and abused by Christians. And that made me really upset at the time because I was a Christian still. And it made me really sad that that was their experience with people. But it makes me so angry because so many Christians I know, the second they hear that, they're not actually hearing what the person is saying, like what their experience was or what happened to them. Instead, they're like, well, that's not really God. Well, that was just people. That wasn't God. Just quickly, as quickly as possible, they will invalidate their experience and just say, well, that's not God. It's so maddening. It's so maddening. And I really am glad that that wasn't my reaction I had coming across a lot of people who had had those experiences. Instead, I felt so angry that people who were Christians were treating them this way and doing this stuff to them. Um, but it seems like the people who are so quick to dismiss it and say, well, it's very much victim blaming. The whole thing is very much victim blaming. Like, oh well, you shouldn't have stopped going to church. Well, you shouldn't have stopped believing in God. Well, you shouldn't. Blah 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 blah. I feel like the people who are very quick to victim blame aren't willing to actually hear these stories for what they are. They aren't actually willing to look and be like, why would people in my religion do this? Or what teachings are promoting this treatment or whatever it is. And it's really frustrating because I get that all the time. And um and even though I didn't do that to other people, I still feel, I was like, man, I was part of something for so long that just constantly victim blamed people for abuse or mistreatment that Christians did to them in the first place. Anyways, that's a little bit of a side tangent. um but this is going to kind of go into my second point, but it's hard to interact with people in just like a normal, chill way when you're being told that everybody who doesn't believe like you is going to go burn in hell for all of eternity. Um, when I went to the world and I was like working and interacting with people who were of different sexualities or different religions or non-religious, I would start building connections with these people. I would start caring about them deeply. I mean, we were around each other every day, obviously, for things like work. I remember thinking to myself, because they were sweet people, they were genuine people, they were people that I considered my friends now, and I remember thinking to myself one day, do I really think these people deserve to go to hell? Is that actually what I think? Um, it gave me such a sense of disgust. And I remember that was like one of the first times I was like, something doesn't feel right. Like this doesn't feel right. And I remember at the very beginning of like even just the nuggets of questioning, um, I felt this pull inside, like this is putting restraints on my ability to accept people and love people and have empathy for people. and just accept them for who they are, because it felt pretty frustrating to me where I'm like, I just want to have these relationships, and I don't care about I don't care what their sexuality is, whether they believe like me or not. I just want I why does this have to come in between us? Why does this have to come in between our friendship and relationship? But when you believe those things, it's hard for it not to. But anyways, overall, I'm just so glad not to have that barrier, because I feel like now there's nothing holding me back from, if I just meet someone different than me, and I have people in my life different than me now, if I just am around those people and that stuff doesn't matter. I don't have to be like, oh my god, they're going to hell, and be scared and feel like I have to change their mind. I have to make them conform to what I believe. There's none of that anymore. We're just people who believe different things, and that is okay. And that's, to me, such a freaking relief. I can't even explain what a relief that is. But anyways, let's go to number 2. Okay, so number 2 basically ties into number 1, which is I no longer have the insane expectation that I need to be out there saving people's souls, which is crazy. It's super normalized, but I feel like we need to recognize what an insane and unrealistic burden that is to put on people. Telling people that your ability to be able to persuade somebody is going to determine if someone's going to burn for eternity. That's crazy. That's crazy. It's crazy to think, wow, if I don't convince this person to believe like me, they're going to burn for all of eternity. That's so incredibly insane to put on people, especially when they teach this to kids and teens, teaching them that people's souls depend on their ability to convince someone to believe like them. That's deranged. It seems normal when you're in it because obviously it's been normalized, but it's not a normal thing to put on somebody. I cannot tell you how many times I hear ex-Christian, so many people in the ex-Christian space talk about how negatively this impacted them as children. They had a friend, they had a cousin, they had a parent who didn't believe in God, and they felt so incredibly devastated. Imagine I'm sure a lot of you don't have to imagine, because I'm sure so many of you experienced it, as a lot of us have, but imagine being a child and being so devastated that because you can't convince someone of your God, they're gonna burn forever, and you have this feeling like, I could save them. That's a crazy thing to put on people in general, but even crazier to put on kids. Obviously that's something that should never be put on a child, and in my opinion, it's extremely damaging because it's like this adult-sized moral burden, for lack of a better term, which I don't even think it's an adult-sized version. Or adult-sized moral burden. I don't even think it's a burden anyone should carry, because it's an insane thing to put on people. From hearing everybody's experiences from the past couple years in regards to this topic, others have experienced, other people have experienced how much anxiety this has led to them as a child, to feel so much anxiety, chronic guilt, learned helplessness, and perfectionism or people pleasing. And when you think about how you are putting such a huge burden on a child, how could that not cause very harmful outcomes? Also, let's talk about how it does and can cause serious nightmares. Now, I wouldn't say I'm somebody who, when I dream, I remember every single dream I have. I'm not kidding you. I don't know if this is normal or not, but I could have a 10-minute nap and I have a dream and I remember what it is. And honestly, it's freaking exhausting, because sometimes I sleep and I'm like, did I even sleep? Because I'm constantly dreaming and I'm constantly remembering it. I'm like, can my mind just shut off? But anyways, that's besides the point. I've had a lot of dreams about things like demon possession. I would say in my teens and early 20s mostly, but they were horrifying. I would wake up in a sweat. My heart would be pounding. It would be awful. Now I still have nightmares, but they're not about things like that. They're not about things like Satan and demons and stuff. Turns out that stuff is only scary when you believe it. And I've also heard people talk about, I know people have experienced that nightmare of either loved ones burning in hell, just up at night thinking I need to save them, or just nightmares about hell, but I've also heard a lot of people talk about this in relation to OCD and how OCD has impacted them, especially as children, where they do this thing, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. I'm sure some of you will comment this, where they were it gave them this like compulsion or like obsession with constantly praying for each family member at the end of the night. They couldn't leave anybody out and they could never forget a prayer, and they had to do it over and over and over and over again, or else something bad would happen to their loved ones or their friends, or they might go to hell, or like whatever it is. And when I don't feel like I've had that experience really, and I don't have OCD, but I did have the thing of being paranoid about not being truly saved, which I know a lot of people have told me about in relation to the OCD thing involving religion, where you're so afraid of not being truly saved that you're constantly asking to be saved again. If you were brought up in evangelicalism, it's like ask Jesus into your heart and you won't go to hell. I remember doing it over and over and over again because I was like, what if I'm not truly saved, guys? Which I think is fair, especially from children, because how would you know you're truly saved or not? That's different depending on every single Christian you ask. So it makes sense to me why that would so badly impact people's OCD and their tendencies. Um, when I was writing everything down I wanted for this video, I actually learned there was a word for the religious impacts on OCD. I had to look up the pronunciation to make sure I was saying it right, but it's called scrupulosity, which is defined as a subtype of obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, involving religious or moral obsessions. Individuals are overly concerned that something they thought or did might be a sin or other violation of religious or moral doctrine. They may worry about what their thoughts or behaviors mean about who they are as a person. So it's leading to excessive fears and compulsions, which involve a lot of different topics. If you want to learn more about this topic, which is actually very interesting, if you're somebody who's experienced this, or if you just want to know more about it like I did, you can see more information on the International OCD Foundation site. I'll put a little link in the description. I know I'm getting sidetracked, but that page gave me a lot of information on stuff I actually didn't know prior to this, even though I've heard often, like so many times over and over again, that people have struggled with religious OCD tendencies, and so I actually didn't know there was a specific word for it. So that's pretty cool that there's actually something that it's recognized and it has its own term. But I know I'm getting sidetracked, so let's go to number 3. It is positively impacted how I take information in around me. A lot of people I know will not like to hear this, but it can really inhibit your ability to take in all sorts of information and evaluate it. When you are in the mindset of my religion is correct, my God is the only possible explanation for everything, it stops you from taking in and evaluating so much information. If it somehow doesn't align with with the thought process you already have, any contradicting information or even perceived contradicting information needs to be ignored, thrown out, or rejected, because this isn't about information, this is about identity and sense of meaning and safety. So I think I definitely experienced this, especially because I was brought up, young earth creationist, so I was taught that evolution wasn't real. So anytime because I was in private Christian school until like 6th grade, and then I went to public school. And, well, first of all, going to public school after that was like it was such a culture shock. But besides that, anytime I heard the word evolution, I got this like, evolution, but that's fake. That's like that's like a worldly thing, or something influenced by Satan to trick people, just like ridiculous stuff like that. So obviously, when I was in these basic science and biology classes, I feel like I really wasn't taking in the information, because I thought to myself, well, I have to pass these tests, but this is false. This isn't true. Not to mention, and I feel weird about this now. I didn't even think about it at the time because, I mean, I was indoctrinated into Christianity. When I was in middle school, I had a science teacher who taught both theories. And by that, I am sure you can guess what I'm going to say, but the theory of evolution and then the theory of creationism. This was at a public school. Looking back, that was insane that he did that. He also went, like, my science teacher went to my church at the time too. And I remember back then I was like so happy about it. Now I'm like, why was he allowed to do that? I don't know how, I don't understand how he was allowed to do that. But yeah, I'm sure that happens all the time in public schools in different areas, but there's also a lot of examples of kind of like what I said with interacting with people, where there's this like mindset of the devil's tricking these people, the devil's influencing these people are lost. There was that way about information that didn't align with the, not even Christianity, but young earth creationism, evangelical Christianity. That subset of like, this stuff is demonic, this stuff is wrong, these people are deceived, all of that type of stuff. And that like science has this agenda that's out to get you. What is that agenda exactly? I don't really know. I don't think anybody really knows what that agenda is. For example, one thing I find interesting when it comes to the topic of how old the earth is, which I was just talking about, if you know how a lot of evangelicals in the United States are young earth creationists, this belief system of young earth creationism includes believing the earth is only 6 to 10,000 years old, even though we know the earth is billions of years old. That's not something that's debatable. But when it comes to this topic, I often ask Christians, like these days, what would anybody gain by telling them the earth is older than what it is? And I can never seem to get an answer, because what would be their gain? What would people gain by getting people to believe the earth is older than what it is? I don't understand who that would benefit at all. It doesn't make sense, especially when you think about the fact that a majority of Christians aren't young earth creationists, and I didn't know this as a Christian. I thought all Christians were young earth creationists. That's how small my bubble was. But especially considering there are so many Christians out there that believe in evolution and the Big Bang and stuff, that it kind of proves that the agenda doesn't work. Because if the agenda of these people and science is to get you not to believe in God, why are there so many Christians that believe in evolution and God? That doesn't make any sense. Or like, and I also didn't know this, some evangelicals don't believe dinosaurs ever existed. Now, when I was a Christian, I did believe dinosaurs existed. I thought they existed the same time as humans, and I also thought they were on the ark. Because, you know, the Creationist Museum and all that, if you guys have ever been there, 10 out of 10, if you want a good laugh, I would recommend going there. But, yeah, I believe this for the longest time, that dinosaurs lived with human beings. But, back to what I was saying, some evangelicals believe that dinosaurs didn't exist at all. So I also typically ask these people, what do scientists gain, or people in that field at all, archaeologists gain, by telling you dinosaurs existed? What do they gain? What do they gain by getting people to believe in dinosaurs if dinosaurs weren't real? And they can never give me an answer. I actually just asked somebody this the other week when I was on Chewed Gum. I'm sure a lot of you guys know me from there. Chewed Gum is a show I do on Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on The Line. If you ever want to watch it. But I asked somebody that, and they couldn't tell me. There was just nothing. I think it's hard to even come up with why anybody would care about that. Now when Christians tell me they don't believe in evolution, I like to ask them a couple things. I'm not a scientist, by the way, okay? I took a basic ass biology classes in like college and stuff. But that's actually where I took in most of my information, because in high school I didn't want to take it in, and then by the time I was in college classes, I was like, okay, this is real information, and I was allowing myself to accept it, thank goodness. But I ask them typically, do you believe that animals can adapt to their environment? And sometimes they're like, don't know how to answer. Sometimes they say yes. And then because I think in a lot of evangelical Christian minds, they think evolution is this thing that can never happen in front of us, like in our lifetime, which just isn't true. So they think it's easy to deny all of it. It's not. because they, like, a lot of them have this mindset of, well, we can't see within our lifetime, so it obviously doesn't happen, which is ironic because everything they believe you can't see. But besides that, I bring up the peppered moth experiment. If you don't know what that is, that was an experiment that happened in the 50s where you could see in real time moths adapting to their environment, which involved the darker moths surviving at higher rates than the lighter moths due to the pollution in the area making the trees a darker color. Therefore, they were better at hiding from predators like birds, and the white ones were easier for the birds to pick out. Therefore, the darker ones had higher rates of survival, leading to there being more darker moths in that area. So it's quite literally somebody seeing in real time evolution take place with an animal adapting to their environment. So when I ask young Earth creationists about this, they typically know this experiment because it's a pretty popular one, maybe the most popular one. They admit that they do believe animals adapt to their environment because, I mean, that's a pretty hard thing to ignore. But then they say that they only believe in microevolution, which is interesting because I always ask them, if you believe in microevolution, what do you think happens over long periods of time with microevolution? Wouldn't it just be more evolution? And like more and more stuff would happen, and they typically like don't really say anything, or they just say no, which doesn't make a lot of sense because then they don't have something to explain to me afterwards why that wouldn't be the case. But anyways, but I guess a lot of that for them can just be solved by saying the world's only 6,000 years old, 6 to 10,000 years old, so how much evolution could have really happened type stuff. So I guess they have that. But back to my point, I don't really have this mindset of I always need to come to this specific conclusion or it destroys my identity and everything that I believe. And I cannot tell you how freeing it is to not have that kind of restraint anymore when interacting with all the information I come in contact with. I want to make it clear I don't think religious people are stupid. And it's not about being stupid. And it actually does frustrate me when I have people like on my social media say stuff like religious people are just stupid, because I think that's really narrow-minded. And I actually think that's like more of a fundamentalist way of thinking, which is something I steer away from. But it has to do with being able to and willing to take in new information and examine it. And that is really hard for a lot of Christians when that it's not just what they believe about the world, it is tied to their entire identity. And I've said this before, but asking someone to put their whole identity to the side to take in new information, that's going to be really hard for people. Obviously it can be done. I did it, and people can do it, but I'm just saying there's that extra barrier there. It's not just about being wrong. It's not just about changing your mind. It's about their identity is the belief. But it feels really good to not have that anymore because I feel like I learn new stuff constantly all the time, and it feels so good to just be like, cool, I was wrong about this thing. I will say I think it was pretty hard, obviously, at the beginning when I was in the depths of deconstructing because I felt really embarrassed. I felt very embarrassed that I believed dinosaurs and humans were alive at the same time period. I was very embarrassed that I believed in the Ark. I was very embarrassed that I believed the Bible was a literal history book. I was very embarrassed by that, but it takes a lot of letting go of your ego to be like, okay, maybe this information is something I should be looking at, examining, taking seriously, and seeing if this is legitimate information. It's much easier to do when your identity is not tied to everything you believe, because even just as people, I have wrong thoughts all the time, just things I don't know about the world, and I learn about them, and I'm like, cool. You know what I mean? Like things in this world in science isn't tied to my identity, and it doesn't have to be a specific thing. It just is what it is, and there's no moral thing tied to it. It's just science. It's just the world around me. It's just nature or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's a lot easier to examine it, and that's pretty cool because it makes learning and critical thinking a hell of a lot easier. Okay, number 4, I do not have an unnecessary fear surrounding the devil and demons. This one's pretty simple. I'm so happy I am no longer having paranoia about the devil and demons around every corner. And now, I think there are different levels to this, obviously. Not one size fits all, but especially lately, I don't think, especially lately with just Christian MAGA and their conspiracies and stuff, I think it makes people even extra paranoid than they were before. But the satanic panic has been a thing for a very long time, so there was always that. Um, but like I mentioned before, I used to have nightmares about demon possession. Um, and that's really horrifying when you believe that's a real thing. Horrifying to believe it could happen to you or someone you love or just anybody. It's a pretty horrifying thing. So if it were something nowadays, if I have a nightmare, I can wake up and be like, that wasn't real. Back then, if I had a nightmare about demon possession, I would wake up and be like, oh, that stuff could actually happen. That's pretty horrifying. Now that I'm out of evangelicalism, I won't lie, it feels so frustrating, especially with everything happening currently in this climate, that evangelicals are consumed by, lack of a better term, pretend problems. I know some people may be offended by that term, but when I say pretend problems, what I mean, I'm not saying it's not real issues for them in their mind, but what I am saying is there's no proof. There's no proof for the devil. There's no proof for demons. There's no proof for spiritual warfare. And people can say it's real and people can say that's factually true, but there's no proof for it at all. So that's why I view them as pretend problems now. But I recognize they're very real problems to them emotionally or in their thinking. But it's frustrating to see it because of how much suffering and harm is being done every single day to everybody and to our planet and to in so many different aspects. And these people are so consumed with problems that don't exist. And instead of focusing on very real issues, many of them are just worried about the demons and devil being around every corner, involved in everything they don't like or anything that makes them feel uncomfortable. And they also like to insert that in anything that's progressive or anything they view as liberal or whatever. They'll claim these people are demonic all the time. They'll claim music's demonic, certain dancing is demonic, like symbols on like packaging, like, or okay, so like Labubu's is an example. I know that sounds insane, but it is. People did this with Pokemon and Harry Potter and D&D. The list goes on. Okay, or like symbols on the monster can saying that it's 666 or something like that. Just being so paranoid of all these different things that aren't a problem to begin with. And that also gets tied into a lot of conspiracy theories on the right. A lot of those conspiracy theories involve the devil and demons and Democrats working with the devil and demons. I often think about how much stuff could get done if all of that energy that was spent on imaginary enemies was put into actually making the world a better place. And like, damn, I can only imagine the shit we could get done, truly, with all of that energy that they put into those problems. But being free from those extra problems that are created by religion is a very freeing feeling, and it gives me so much more peace. Not to mention, like, life is hard enough as it is. I think we all know that. There's so much in life that can go wrong. There's so much in life that is hard, is difficult, causes suffering or stress or whatever. I don't need extra problems. I don't have the room for it. I don't have the energy for it. And if I am going to be stressed about something, or if I am going to feel very real feelings about something and seeing suffering and whatever, I want to be focused on real things that are happening to real people, not on things that aren't even proven to exist. Right, and now we're at number 5, which is I no longer prioritize conforming. Molding myself into what I thought I had to conform to, in religion to what I thought God wanted, or in relation to what I thought the people around me wanted, or wanted me to be or act like or do. Often this makes me think of even when I was still Christian towards the end, a lot of people didn't consider me a true Christian because my politics changed before my religious beliefs. And I cannot tell you how often I hear that true Christians can't vote progressive, true Christians can't be Democrat, true Christians can't be leftist, whatever it is, whatever, anything besides conservative, you can't be a Christian in that at the same time, which is just dumb because if you can pick what you want from the Bible and cherry pick what's important to you, then why can't a progressive Christian do that too? But they're always telling me that, that's not what God wants, and these progressive values are so against God, and these conservative values are honoring God. And a lot of these conservative values, if that's what you want to call them, they're nothing that's coming from the Bible. It's just coming from evangelical culture. Like there's nothing in the Bible that says abortion's wrong. They can take certain verses and try and twist them and turn them and say something about them and say that it's wrong, but there's so many things in the Bible that there's so many things in like our country that they're so against, but you can't actually give me a Bible verse to say, "Oh, God really hates this." And even if he does, who cares? But that's because I want separation of church and state. So, um, anyways, it feels really good not to have a weird rule book of who I am or what I'm supposed to do, who I'm supposed to be, what my values must be, etc. As long as I'm not hurting other people, I do not have to ask myself, is this what God wants? Am I still a real Christian? Is this what Christians think are right? No, I don't have to ask that. Um, and I'm not saying this to any individual, but I cannot tell you how good it feels to say fuck you to the entire system that's trying to get you to conform. It's so freeing. And this is maybe weird to say because I'm 31 and I've been on my own for so long, since I'm like 21. But some days I'll be at just like doing whatever I want or having these conversations, and I just sit here and I'm like, holy shit, I can believe I can discover things for myself. I can have my own opinions. I can be my own person. I don't have to follow this arbitrary timeline of like getting married, having kids, going to church on like, and then the things I have to do, going to church on Sunday, believing the right things, having the right politics, like the list goes on and on and on. And there was like a time period where I just felt like I was going to lose my mind being in that kind of environment of you have to be this way, this way, this way. And there were so many times in my life where I felt like I didn't belong. And it wasn't because I wanted to sin. It was just because I was so tired of feeling like I had to conform to all of these different things all the time. And then it's not very forgiving when you do something out of line, honestly. Usually it's not. Anyways, it literally, it unironically, well, first, I also want to say, it's an amazing feeling knowing that you don't have to follow the rules, like I said, besides the fact that Christian nationalism is quite literally trying to force us all to conform the government, like, to their religion in the form of the government, but besides that, it feels great. Um, it literally feels like that meme in comment sections you see where the person is like breaking their chains. That's what it felt like. And now it feels like Christian nationalism is like, come here, let me put the chains back on. That's why I'm so passionate about Christian nationalism, because as someone who has left this environment where it's so strictly about conforming and they want to force you to do it through government, it's so maddening. So obviously it's going to be something I'm super passionate about, and I know a lot of ex-Christians feel the same, where they're like, damn, I just left that environment. Why is it getting so bad right now? It's a special kind of pain. But I've genuinely just never felt more myself these days for a lot of reasons, and that's a huge one for me. I would say, if I had to give myself a number one reason, I would feel like that's probably the biggest positive for me, because it impacts every single thing else in my life. It impacts it impacts my relationships, it impacts my confidence, it impacts how I view myself, it impacts the information I take in, it impacts how I can learn, how I can grow, everything. And it's just such an amazing feeling I do not take for granted. And like I said in the video where I was talking about Christianity and like the hard parts about it, all of it's worth it to come back to myself and have me and be me, because at the end of the day, sometimes it's just you know, you have to be happy with who you are, the choices you make, and I feel good about it. I do, and that's a really, really good feeling. But yeah, those are the 5 positive things. Well, not the only 5 positive things, but those are 5 positive things I've experienced from leaving religion. Please comment and tell me yours, give me a list, or just tell me one positive thing you've had since leaving religion, that you experience now, that you experienced right when you left, whatever it is. And you don't even have to have had been somebody who left it completely. You can be somebody who left a high control version of religion, because I know that on my other platforms and some here, I do have some Christians following me, and I still want you to know that I see you as well, because I know what it's like to go through the process of still being a Christian but being progressive or something else, and leaving that strict conform environment, and it still being really hard. So you're included in that. But yeah, that's it. I'm sure I'll do more positive lists in the future, because I like doing this, and I also really want to hear from you guys on this topic. But yeah, I hope you guys are all taking care of yourselves. I hope you're all doing good, and I will see you in the next one.